How then are they to call on him in whom they have not believed? How are they to believe in him whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without a preacher? But how are they to preach unless they are sent? Just as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news of good things. Now, as usual, Paul is appealing almost in every verse that he writes. He's appealing to the law and the prophets. He's appealing to what we call the Old Testament scriptures. And he's asking here concerning Israel, how are they? And the they is Israel. How was Israel to call on him, that is on Jesus, in whom they have not believed or in whom they have not trusted? How are they to trust in him whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without a preacher? Now, actually, this is not actually Paul asking it, he is parroting or echoing some of the things which may have been said by others. And that's one of the things that I have discovered about Paul in his writings. A lot of times when he writes these questions, it is not as if they are questions that he asked, or it is actually rhetorical questions sometimes, or it's sometimes questions of which folks are asking, of which he will then supply the answer, right? But anyway, so the impression here is that, well, can Israel be at fault if they never heard the gospel, right? How can they believe in Christ if they did not know about him, right? And he quotes here, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news of good things. This is actually Isaiah 52 verse 7. So what the idea that Paul is getting at here is he's addressing the thought, or maybe the comment, or maybe the opinion of some, that Paul and the apostles were preaching something entirely new and entirely unheard of, right? But that is why Paul is appealing to the law and the prophets. As a matter of fact, there was a principle established in Isaiah 8 verse 20. If we go there, Isaiah 8 verse 20, there was a principle established in Isaiah 8 verse 20. It says there, to the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak in accordance with this word, it is because they have no dawn. And the idea of dawn is light towards the day, okay? So according to Isaiah, that anyone that is bringing light, it must be according to the law and to the testimony. In other words, the law and the prophets, which is the old covenant scriptures, right? And as we read Romans, we have been reading Romans chapter 9, Romans chapter 10 so far, we see that Paul consistently pulls from the law, the writings of Moses, and the prophets, Isaiah, Hosea, etc. They did not all heed the good news. And the good news here is translated in your mainstream Bible as gospel. And that's literally gospel means good news, right? So they did not hear the gospel. They did not heed the gospel, meaning they did not listen attentively, or they did not conform to the instructions in the gospel, right? They did not heed the gospel for Isaiah. Notice he quotes Isaiah now again. So you notice Paul continually appealing to the law and the prophets. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our report? And here he's quoting Isaiah 53, verse 1. Okay? who has believed our report? So that, verse 17, so faith comes from hearing, and hearing by or concerning the word of Christ. Okay? Faith trust comes from hearing, and hearing the word concerning Christ. Okay? The word concerning Christ. So therefore, when Paul quotes, for example, Isaiah 53 here, when he appeals to Isaiah 53, what Paul is saying, hey, you know what? the gospel that we are preaching can be found in Isaiah 53. Good? So let's just take a trip into Isaiah chapter 53, all right, to see what Paul is talking about. So we read from verse 1. It says, who has believed our report? Remember, this is what he actually quoted there in Romans chapter 10, verse 16. And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. He has no stately form nor majesty that we would look at him, nor an appearance that we would take pleasure in him. Now, who is this we? Who is this we? The we here is Israel. All right? So Isaiah, through the Spirit of the Lord, is speaking about someone who would come to Israel, and Israel would not esteem that person. That person in Israel's eyes had no stately form or majesty that they would take notice of him, nor an appearance that Israel would take pleasure in him. He was despised and abandoned by men, and the men here again would be Israel, because context, Isaiah is writing to Israel, right? So this person would be despised and abandoned by Israel. He would be a man of great pain and familiar with sickness, and like one from whom people hide their faces. Again, Israel would hide their faces from this person. He was despised. He would be despised by Israel, and Israel had no regard for him. All right, let's continue. However, it was our sicknesses that he himself bore. This person would be a healer of diseases, of the diseases of Israel. And our pains he carried the pains of Israel. Yet Israel themselves assumed that he had been afflicted, struck down by God, and humiliated. Now, listen, any discerning person by now would realize this is talking about Jesus Christ. This is talking about the Messiah. This is talking about the Son of the living God, right? And his ministry to Israel, right? And this is on the cross, this verse particularly here, we talk about, we assume that he had been afflicted and struck down by God and humiliated. This was Jesus's crucifixion experience. As a matter of fact, his trial and crucifixion experience, where the Jews mocked him and said, well, if you are the Son of God, come down from the cross, right? Because how can you be the Son of God and you're being put through all of this humiliation and all of this affliction? Good. But actually, as Isaiah says, but he was actually pierced for Israel's offenses. He was crushed for Israel's wrongdoings. The punishment of Israel, or for Israel's well-being, was laid upon him, and by his wounds Israel would be healed, right? Verse 6, and all of us, all of Israel, like sheep have gone astray. Each of them had turned to his own way. It's talking about Israel. That's why Jesus came to the lost sheep, the sheep that went astray of the house of Israel. But the Lord has caused the wrongdoing of Israel to fall on him, right? It's talking about the sacrificial atonement made, the sin offering made by God for the sins of Israel, right? So this is the gospel, right? This is the gospel being preached, being revealed in Isaiah. And Isaiah was written some, 600 years before Christ, as we may say, before the advent of Jesus Christ. Good? He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shearers, so he did not open his mouth. We're talking about Jesus at his crucifixion, where all these charges were laid against him, and he did not respond. He did not open his mouth. He did not defend himself, right? By oppression and judgment, he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off from the land of the living for the wrongdoing of my people, to whom the blow was due. This is the gospel, right? This is the core gospel. And it was being read by the priest in the temple. It was being read by the rabbis in the synagogues every Sabbath day to the people of Israel, right? And his grave was assigned with wicked men. Do you remember Jesus? When he was crucified, on his left and on his right were two wicked men. Yet he was with a rich man in his debt. That was Nicodemus, I think, and Joseph. Is it Joseph of Arimathea? Yeah, that was the rich man, because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. Jesus says, "For which sin are you convicting me of? Which sin are you accusing me of?" But the Lord desired to crush him, causing him grief, if he renders himself as a guilt offering. See that? A sin offering. He will see his offspring. He will prolong his days, and the good pleasure of the Lord will prosper in his hand. As a result of the anguish of his soul. Do you remember Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he says that his soul was so heavy and so torn because of the sufferings that he had to go through for the atonement of Israel. As a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied. I think in the book of Hebrews, it talks about Jesus went through that ordeal for the joy. Okay, so he by faith he looked forward to what his sin offering would accomplish. Okay, by his knowledge, the righteous one, my servant. Notice now this person is being identified. He is the righteous one, my servant, will justify. That is why on the road to Damascus, not the road to Damascus now, the road to Emmaus, on the day after the third day after Jesus' crucifixion, and the two disciples were walking on the road to Damascus. I think one his name was Cleopas. I can't remember the name of the other one. And they were so dejected. They were so disappointed that the Messiah had been crucified, and it's like everything was hopeless. And then they encountered Jesus on that road. Jesus revealed himself to them, and then Jesus began to talk to them, and he began to give them, as it were, a Bible study in the Old Testament. And I would believe that he would have talked to them about Isaiah 53. And he said to them, listen, didn't you know that I had to go through all of this to come into my glory? It was already written that these things should happen. Yeah. By his knowledge, the righteous one, my servant, will justify the many again. Read Romans chapter 5. This is what Paul was writing about when he says, by the obedience of one, many shall be justified. By the disobedience of one, that is, by the disobedience of Adam, many died. But by the obedience of one, many shall receive life and receive justification. And this is the gospel again. Right? And therefore, verse 12, I will allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the plunder with the strong, because he has poured out his life unto death. He poured out his life unto death, and was counted with the wrongdoings, yet he himself bore the sin of many, and interceded for the wrongdoer. Read Romans chapter 8. Paul talks about the intercessionary ministry of Christ. These are things that Paul did not come up with. He did not, these were not of his own idea. These were things which were written hundreds of years beforehand in the law and the prophets. So though if you are coming to the conclusion that, oh, Paul was a Roman infiltrator, what does that say about your understanding of the scriptures? So Paul refers to Isaiah 53 there to say, look, Israel actually knew about the gospel before Paul even came on the scene. Okay? So if you go back to Romans chapter 10, verse 18, if we continue reading in Romans chapter 10, if we bridge from Romans 17, so faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word concerning Christ. Yeah. So that faith should have already been generated by reading Isaiah chapter 53. So verse 18, he goes on to say, but I say, again, he's echoing, or he's asking a rhetorical question, or maybe he's echoing the questions of those of his time. He says, but I say, surely they have never heard, have they? He responds, on the contrary. And again, now he quotes Psalm 19. Verse 4 here, he says, their voice has gone out into all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Again, amazing. And this verse here also, it says here, the heavens, Psalm 19 verse 1, well, this is just the introductory a Psalm of David, but it begins here, the heavens tell of the glory of God, and their expanse declares the work of his hands, the firmament here, right? So Psalm 19 begins, if you begin reading it, seems to be talking about, hey, the sun, moon, and stars, the heavens and the firmament, right? Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, their voice in other words. Let me see. This kind of is a kind of slightly different, and I don't like this this translation. Again, this is the New American Standard Bible. I don't think it renders this. So let me just put it in the Faithful Version, okay? Let me just put it in the Faithful Version. Right? And let's read this over. I really am not impressed with the New American Standard Bible, to be honest, right? Anyway, so it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork, right? Day after day, they, that is the heavens, pour forth speech, and night after night they reveal knowledge. The heavens pour forth speech every day, and every night they reveal knowledge. Good. So just by reading that, you will say, okay, yeah, this is talking about the stars and the galaxies, the sun, moon, and the stars and galaxies. They reveal, there is this marvelous creator. Okay? There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone through all the earth. So the line of the heavens has gone through all the earth, and their words, the words of the heavens, to the ends of the world. But Paul applies this, especially verse 4 part, to to prove that Israel knew the gospel. This shows that Paul had the understanding, now listen carefully, Paul had the understanding that Psalm 19 was not talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars, the material or the cosmic heavens. It was actually a metaphor of the teaching of the law and the prophets to Israel, of which the sun, the moon, and the stars were the priests in the temple, right? Because you remember, in the temple, in the most holy place, that was where you had the glory of God manifested, and so that represented heaven. And the priests who operated between the heaven of the temple and the earth, which were the people, that space, that holy place space where they operated, that was the firmament. Okay? That was the division between heaven and earth. They operated in the firmament, right? And so when they taught Israel the law and the prophets, they were the lights in the heavens which were pouring forth speech and knowledge to Israel, right? They were the lights in the heavens for Israel. So Israel knew Isaiah 53 because of the lights of the heavens, the ministry of the priests that were preaching and teaching the light of the law and the prophets. That's why we have Isaiah 8:20. To the law and the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because they have no light, or because there is no dawn in them. Okay? And that is why Paul was continually appealing to the light in the law and the prophets, the Old Testament scriptures.